Good morning, Creekside. We get to be in we get to be in Philippians today, chapter 1. Let me read you from our passage, and then I'll share a few thoughts, and we'll spend some time thinking together. Uh, it says, Paul writes to the churches in Philippi, only let your manner of life be worthy of the gospel of Christ, so that whether I come and see you or am absent, I may hear of you, of your standing firm in one spirit, with one mind, striving side by side for the faith of the gospel, and not frightened in anything by your opponents. This is a clear sign to them of their destruction, but of your salvation, and that from God. For it has been granted to you that for the sake of Christ you should not only believe in him, but also suffer for his sake, engaged in the same conflict that you saw I had, and now here I still have. All right, so we'll kind of go through that and break that down in a minute, but just a reminder of sort of what the condition of Paul is in this situation. Remember, Paul is in prison. He's writing these letters, and he's writing to these churches in Philippi. He's trying to encourage them. He's that even though he is in change, and even though he is suffering, that it's worth it, and that he sees knowing Christ as really the only thing worth living for. And so, whether his circumstances are physically where he's imprisoned and in a cell, or whether he's out sharing life with them, uh, as he travels city to city preaching the gospel. None of it matters, the context, but the good thing is that he has Jesus. Okay, so he's been establishing that here. But in this particular section, what he's saying is he's trying to challenge them to live corporately in a particular way, because in light of the gospel. In fact, there's this phrase at the very beginning. It says in verse 27, he says, only let your manner of life be worthy of the gospel of Christ. And the way that gets translated, let your manner of life be worthy of the gospel of Christ, is it's fine, it's accurate, but there's an imperative verb there, which means there's like a command that Paul's giving them, and it's the word manner. And what he's saying is, he's saying, if you like look at the original Greek of the word, what it's saying is that it's this command to live. Like, you got to live in a certain way. Like, you got to go out and you have got to live. But the context of it, that word, it comes from the Greek word polis, which is city. So he's saying you have to live as a city, as a people. You have to live together corporately, in a manner that is worthy of the gospel. So what it does is it adds a little bit more corporate nature to that, like mandate to live. So when Paul's talking here, he's not just saying, oh, hey, Joe, you live on your street. You need to make sure that you're always, sort of happy and and uh, and loving and caring, um, to the few people you interact with. I mean, sure, yeah, that's all good, and of course we should be loving and caring to all the people we interact with. But there's a greater corporate sense here that Paul is saying. He's saying, look, I'm in prison and I'm suffering, and what matters is that you are a people of the gospel. And being a people of the gospel means that you conduct yourself as a city. You're like you have a different citizenship. You are citizens of this people of Jesus. And so what you have to do is, whether you're suffering like I am or not, whether you're going through something hard or not, whether COVID has struck your family particularly hard or not, whether illness has struck your family particularly hard or not, or you're in a difficult situation with your kids or your family, or whatever it is, whatever circumstantially may be difficult for you, Paul's mandate isn't just that you individually make it through, but that in that struggle, in that fight, that there be this corporate citizenship that you realize that you're a part of, and that you conduct yourselves corporately in such a way, in such a manner that is worthy of the good news of Jesus. I think that's the other word that I think is worth just kind of focusing on for a second. He says we are to corporately, like a city, like a new citizenship, conduct ourselves in such a way that is worthy of the gospel of Jesus Christ. But what he's saying is you got to conduct yourselves in the way that is in accordance with the good news of Jesus. I think that's the challenge when it comes to struggle or frustration or hardship or things that aren't going well circumstantially. Um, is to remember that fundamentally this city, this new city that we're a part of, this new polis, this new um, way in which we're called to conduct ourselves is fundamentally, um, and maybe in some ways most importantly, seen and experienced when we are a people of good news, when we are not negative and cynical and jaded, when we are not critical and judgmental and contentious, when we are a people that are characterized as a people of good news, someone you like would want to be around, you know? I mean, here's the thing with suffering, like we all get it, like it when you're going through something rough, when you're in a hard circumstance, like it feels a lot better to complain. You want people to recognize and know and see the suffering you're going through, and um, I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, "Hey, look, I'm struggling. This is hard. This is rough." Um, but we also all know what it's like to be around people who are just kind of always complaining, where they're always something's always broken for them or hard for them or something is always isn't working for them. Their spouse isn't loving them the way that they should, or their job is something that isn't fulfilling, or their kids aren't getting along, or they're always struggling financially, um, or the health in their family is bad, and so every interaction and every time that you're with them, there's this sense that the world is out against them or that things are really, really rough. But I think that the Bible is full of a myriad of emotions. You read the Psalms, and David is complaining about how things are hard, and so there is a place to be honest. But I think it is this is like such a good reminder for me, such a good reminder that to conduct myself in a manner that's worthy of the gospel is to conduct myself in such a way that um, I remember that first and foremost, I'm part of a citizenship and a people of good news. And that though Paul was in prison, he didn't write a letter to complain to them about that, right? He mentions it, it's there, it's his reality. But he also sees that the circumstances are just another opportunity for the gospel, just another opportunity to see and to understand Jesus, his relationship with Jesus in a different way, to understand, to have intimacy with God in a different way, to then go out and to write these letters, which he never would have written, maybe if he wasn't in prison, to write these letters in a way to encourage other people. So the gospel doesn't have to stop going out. The good news doesn't have to stop being lived because obviously circumstances are rough. And I don't know how you're feeling, where when we're at in this particular place with COVID. Maybe for some of you it is rough, and maybe for others of you it's become kind of a new normal and it's not so bad. And um, I don't know where you're at, and I'm sure it's probably different at different times of the day or weeks or months. But this is such a good reminder for me that to conduct my life in a way that is worthy of the gospel really is to be a person and a people of good news. He goes on to say a little bit more what that looks like. He says, so that whether I come and see you or I am absent, I may hear of you that you are standing firm in one spirit, with one mind, striving side by side for the faith of the gospel, and not frightened in anything by your opponents. So again, like, I think growing up in the church, my concept of, if someone was to say to you, like, what does it mean to conduct your life in accordance with the gospel? Like, what does it mean to conduct, wait, the actual word says, what does it mean to let your manner of life be worthy of the gospel? I would have told you, well, it means that I don't drink, and um, don't have sex before I'm married, and I um, don't use curse words, and I am polite and kind to everybody around me, um, and to me that would sum up what it means to conduct myself in a manner that is worthy of the gospel. And I do think that all of those things are throughout Scripture. They are um, kind of our moral decisions that we make do have an impact of our relationship with Jesus. But when we talk about when we talk about conducting ourselves in a manner worthy of the gospel, Paul goes right back to being one in spirit. So it isn't just about you living some holy life that is worthy of Jesus. Though, again, I'm not trying to say that there aren't implications of that. There are. But when Paul's talking here specifically to this new citizenship, he's trying to make them understand that it is their oneness in spirit, they're standing firm together, that makes them worthy of the gospel. Now, that is a challenging thought, right? And we talk about it a lot at Creekside, and I've talked about it a lot over the years, that it's remarkable to me how much we can get this part of the good news of the gospel messed up, that we start to see and trade being right on particular things for actually giving us a cause to divide in spirit, and to undermine each other, and to criticize each other, and to divide, um, and to lose sight of what we're living to do, which is to know and love Jesus and to proclaim the gospel to the world. We lose sight of all of that in all of our small little divisions. You see it like right now with the COVID stuff. It was like there was a split second, I would say like a week, when all of the news was coming down and life was changing day by day as more restrictions are coming. And I got this sense that, like, for a moment, for like maybe a week, maybe 10 days, it felt like it didn't matter if you were Republican or you were Democrat. We are just all figuring out like how we're going to deal with the fact that there's this threat, this virus. And then it didn't take but a week or 10 days to where you could go on CNN or Fox News, and each party, each side had a different view of of the thing, and it became contentious again and politicized again, to where this is about government overreach, or this is about um, protecting our sick, and it becomes so charged. And it just shows that there's something in this human spirit that is prone to division. It's prone to make other people the bad guys. It's prone to call other people stupid. It's prone to just divide. And there's something about the gospel that when it's rooted in a people, they can suffer and they can struggle without pointing fingers. That's a pretty good litmus test. Like, can I suffer and struggle without pointing fingers at somebody else and saying it's your fault? I think if we're a people who stand firm in the gospel, Paul is calling the Philippians to this manner in living where he sees them standing firm together. That though they are different, that they have this one united spirit, and though that there are opponents that will come in and undermine the message of the gospel, that they would stand firm in what is important and what matters the most. They would have one mind, striving side by side for faith in the good news. I think that's beautiful. I hope that that characterizes whatever the future holds in the next month, 2 months, or few weeks, or whatever it is, as we're in this weird and bizarre, almost social experiment where we're now, everything we used to know um, has been changed in terms of church. Like, we don't come together on Sundays, we don't sing, we don't preach. We do some video messages, some discussions in our homes. You'll do some home church stuff with your gospel communities probably for a while, and then we'll gather together again. So in that time, my hope is that what we can see flourishing is that we are side by side and contending for the good news of Jesus. What does that look like? I think it looks like being side by side and contending for the optimism of the gospel. The that we don't become people who are cynical and jaded and overly critical of what's happening in politics, or overly, I mean, we're in like election season, and I think I think there's one good thing about COVID to me, is that politics has taken a little bit of a back seat. Because right now we'd be in the thick of just the slugfest, but uh but we're entering into the season where things are going to continue to be difficult for each of us in different ways, and different, and there's opportunity for political division and all of that kind of stuff. And what I see here is Paul just saying, hey, look, no matter how you gather as the church, whether you keep gathering over video or in small groups in backyards, or when we get together again and we get to worship together, and do some of the things that we love about gathering together in large spaces, make sure that we are side by side, shoulder to shoulder, contending for faith in the good news, right? We're contending for faith in the good news. We're not contending for faith in some agenda. We're contending for faith in the good news of Jesus. And that means that amongst a people, a citizenship, there's going to be a lot of diversity. But there's something beautiful about the gospel that can bring Jew or Gentile and Greek, male and female, slave and free together. Like, that's gorgeous. That's beautiful. And we get to be a part of that. And Paul's reminding them of that. Not being frightened in anything by your opponents. I think that's really critical. If we're going to stay a people who conduct ourselves in a manner worthy of the gospel, we can't be afraid. It's one of the things with COVID that probably gets me the most bummed out, is that it propagates this certain fear of each other. And don't get me wrong, I think all the restrictions are helpful, and it's all in the best interest of saving lives. I'm not overly critical of that, but I have noticed, I don't know if you've noticed the difference when you're walking in the store and when you're next to people, and now people are kind of afraid of each other. Some are, some don't care, but some people are afraid. And fear is powerful when it comes to division. The fear that um, you may be right or wrong, the fear that that someone else might threaten or hurt you, the fear that you might make a mistake, um, the fear of being judged, all fear as a whole really undermines our ability to be unified as a people. And so I think Paul points that out, that there are going to be opponents who come, and they're saying things maliciously, or just even accidentally, in contrast to the gospel, and it's going to undermine our ability to be a good news people, to be a people who see ourselves shoulder to shoulder together. He says this is a clear sign of their destruction, but of your salvation, and that from God. So the clear sign of their destruction is this division that comes, but the clear sign of their salvation is the ability to be one side by side, even when they're suffering. For it has been granted to you that for the sake of Christ you should not only believe in him, but also suffer for his sake, engaged in the same conflict that you saw I had, and now hear that I still have. It's so interesting. What Paul says is like to be a part of this good news population, this good news city, this good news citizenship is to conduct yourself in such a way where you're worthy of the gospel. So you should be filled, as a people of hope and joy and love and kindness and all these like really optimistic and positive things because of Jesus. And yet at the same time, you'll be a people who are struggling and suffering because the world is contrary to the gospel, or you're going through actual physical limitations, the thorns in your in your side, like Paul describes in one of his letters. And the idea is that no matter what we're doing in this life, we're going to experience some kinds of suffering. But there's a manner, a way in which we suffer when we know Jesus. That's the challenge for us. Is if you know Jesus, how do you suffer? How do you go through these things? Do you allow your suffering to create divisions in your family? Do you allow your suffering to create divisions in your church? Do you allow your suffering to create others and people who have done it to you? Or do you suffer like Paul suffers, where he sees that everything he's doing is an opportunity for the gospel? Everything is an opportunity for the gospel. You in prison, it's an opportunity for the gospel. You going through cancer, it's an opportunity for the gospel. Your family at odds, it's an opportunity for the gospel. You stuck in your house, it's an opportunity for the gospel, right? There is no life circumstance where it is not an opportunity for the gospel, an opportunity to be a people of good news of Jesus. All right, guys, it's so good to see you on the video. Let's have a little bit of time discussion. Maybe share with your group what it looks like to live in a manner that's worthy of the gospel. Whoever you're with, whether it's your family or friends, and spend some time praying together. Maybe use the Lord's Prayer as a way to pray together, where you just thank God for, well, you know the Lord's Prayer. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. All right. Peace.